Hey, it's Chris. What are we talking about? We're going back. We're going back 2 years now at this point. Missed the other video we talked about 3 years ago, because that's really looking back at the test of time and saying how many of these games still matter, or still in your collection, or you still care about. We're only doing 2 years this time, but I'm covering January and February. 1, because I'm late doing the video, and 2, because there are less games to look at overall that were bigger name at that point. And I'm a little sore from a recent workout of clean and presses, so let's see what we can do. Let's go. January, February 2022. I was just looking into 2020's games, folks. The everyone's top whatever games of that one too. That list did not stand up nearly as well test of time as some of the more recent year or twos I think are going to. But that's a total other digression, because we're talking about crowdfunding, not just tops. You ready? Let's go. First up here, let's just get the elephant out of the room. And that's Marvel Zombicide. I mean, that was already 2 years ago funded on crowdfunding. We all just got our copies. And it's the, like I said, elephant in the room here. Is it really that good? And I guess for all the people out there saying, I told you so, you're probably right, because it's just another Zombicide. I hate to say that, but it's just another Zombicide. And I honestly don't know what I'm going to do with it. I kind of feel meh. I put it on my list of top 20 games of 2023, but truth be told, I mean, it was pretty far down that list, and I could see it falling. Not just a little bit, but meteorically just falling, because I just look at it and I go, this learn to play, this minutia, the aesthetic is fine, but as I said in the other video, the bang for your buck, the immediate gratification that I want out of a game like this, Zombicide locks it behind levels, locks it behind random decks. The cool thing about United, the cool thing about Dice Throne, the cool thing, well, maybe less cool thing about Legendary, but it gives you the oomph right away factor for the most part. You're getting to do the cool stuff. It doesn't make you just kind of, now I'm not saying that you obviously, are going to get all the cool stuff, dice rolling, card driven drawing, some of that's going to get in your way. But it just seems to be a little bit just like you're reaching for something with an outstretched arm, and it's just out of your reach. And I don't know about you nowadays, but I literally just had, in this past week, show up at my doorstep, to my wife's chagrin. Actually, I don't even think she realizes what's in the big box, but the smaller box is obvious. The smaller box, he says, of his ISS Vanguard, all in one wave shipping. The other one being Mythic Battles Ragnarok. That box is freaking huge. That may be one of the biggest boxes I've ever gotten. And I just got like the core pledge. I'm like scared to open it up, and because I double checked my pledge on that one, folks. I didn't get into the add-ons. As cool as some of those add-ons were, I just couldn't, So I look at that and I go, I want immediate gratification nowadays, right? Like I said about 2023's games as a whole, there was a fantastic year. That was an incredibly hard list for me to put out. I re-ranked stuff in my top 10 literally on the day of me filming that video. Legitimately did that. No joke. I could rearrange things probably today and get a different order for you on the majority of those 10 games, because I feel that great about them overall. And this one just has me, lukewarm. You're not hot, you're not cold, you're lukewarm, and I'm going to spit you out. And that's what this feels like to me so far. I'm willing to give it a shot, though, further. I don't want to regret getting rid of it. I think I can make money. Got 2 expansions, but I say this, and I truly, some of you are probably just saying he just says this and he's, total cynic on this. I don't buy stuff to resell stuff, right? I can back plenty of more crowdfunding. I am doing well enough from a speculative market side of things that I can look at stuff and say, this is going to get good resell. This isn't nowadays. I mean, I know I did that for a little bit, even before I made this channel. I was very good at that side of things. I don't do that. I do not do that. I do not want to do that. It is such a forking hassle nowadays. I have such a large list of selling stuff. I would love to empty the calyx that's behind this camera so I could actually have a halfway decent, moderately productive area to do this in. but I also just don't want to give them away completely, although that's getting more and more appealing on the day. Anyway, but I digress. Marvel does Zombicide, and DC, you know, it appealed to me for the same reasons. But ultimately, you know, I have more attachment to the Marvel, so thankfully I didn't have as much attachment to the DC. And I'm grateful, I guess, now that I got Marvel well after DC's campaign ended, that I didn't get in on it. Now you could probably late pledge still at the time of me filming this, so who cares, right? I could always FOMO that now as well, but I don't know. Is it really going to surpass the other Zombicides? Does it really surpass the Zombicide box that they all sort of fit in? And my answer kind of right now is no, unfortunately. So I've rambled on that long enough. Puzzle Strike 2. Puzzle Strike 2. Boom, right there. One of my top 3 games. Was it number 2 of 2022? I love this game. I love this game. I do not like the wand that they included. I think it looks kind of tacky, but the gameplay mechanistic deck building aspect that they've done with this is absolutely fantastic. This is a game that's not going to leave my collection, right? Just from that aspect of things. And so that one has definitely stood up the test of time. I have no qualms about saying my own personal preference for that. Each deck plays dramatically different, and that's the coolest part about this. And it's not anything like the original Puzzle Strike, version 2 or 3 or whatever it is. And so that was the great appeal. And so I really cannot say enough positive things about this. I haven't gotten played nearly enough. Again, the aesthetic is just kind of weird from Sibling Games. You know, the crystals are fine, but I think it could be a $30 game, $40 game, and be more widely accessible. And the luxifications that went with it, if they weren't there, you wouldn't really be missing out. It's not one of those games, I'll say, that I really feel like the deluxifications make it that much better for me. Some, very few do, but this is not one of them. That being said, the gameplay still triumphs over a lot of other stuff. So it's, you know, just clear and away above a winner in my collection and what I personally prefer as a whole. So that one's easy. Final Girl from 2 years ago. I don't know. Final Girl, I'm going to way out of this, you know. Got myself in trouble the last time I talked about Final Girl. And I just think that it's not a game for me. And that's okay. But, truth be told, I think it's very well thought of on solo games as a whole. And going over to Board Game Geek, this is crowd related, not me related, right? This is folks like you voting on Board Game Geek. Of 2023, of all time, it has ranked right now 12. Behind some serious heavy hitters. Behind Gloomhaven, Imperium Classics, Terraforming Mars, Ark Nova, Dune Imperium, Too Many Bones, Lord of the Rings LCG, Arkham Horror LCG, Marvel Champions LCG, Mage Knight, and Spirit Island. So that's a high pedigree. Mix and matching, modularity, get your tapes, get your bad guys, get your locations. I would argue then, you know, eat a little crow on this one. It's not for me. I think it is a little bit Marvel United-esque, very vaguely. In the sense that, you know, do you need it all? Is it all that much dramatically different? Are you going to get your money's worth? Or do you pick and choose a few that really suit you or suit your interests more? And that's the comparison I'll make. I'll leave it there. It's a vague comparison. It's not apples to apples there. But, you know, I like what they've done with it. And it seems to be a very successful IP. And I give them a lot of kudos for that, even as a doubter myself originally. That's okay. You know what? It's not for me, but people like it. And that is good. Get what's right for you. Then next up, we actually have Ostia. 1 to 4 player, Mancala based, water driven, sort of port style, expanding your fleet game. And from the designer Oshiba Koya, which also put out Aqua Garden and more recently Amalfi, it's coming back actually to crowdfunding later this year with an expansion. So is it really that good? Again, it's one of those Japanese indie games that you aren't going to get anywhere in the secondary market. And I think Oshiba Koya has really been one of the few prolific overseas crowdfunders as a whole, especially from an incredibly small publisher, and you can't get it hardly anywhere in the secondary market. I think the last time I saw Aqua Garden was on their website, and again, it was like a good 50% higher price cost as a whole comparatively to what it was on crowdfunding. And that's enticing. I mean, yeah, it's not super high ranked, right? It's, you know, in the Board Game Geek top 5,000, but it only has 275 ratings, but it still has a very respectable 7.8 overall. Doing something Mancala-esque. I like the idea of that. So we're going to see. That's going to be the interesting test, right? Are people really as enamored with it? What are they going to do? What are they going to shell out for this? Aqua Garden got a huge boost on their second crowdfunding with the expansions that launched that one further. So will Ostia do it as well? I may be intrigued to kind of see. Then, next up, we just talked about Aeon's End, The Descent. At the time of me filming this, it has not yet launched, but it will be launching very, 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 very shortly. But we're also talking about Astronauts, right? Astronauts was basically going to relaunch Aeon's End into the 2.0 version. And there was some conversation about, is this the end of Aeon's End? No, there really wasn't. I'm just kidding. It was basically like, okay, how much more Aeon's End are we going to see? If Astronauts really, smacks it out of the park, is that just going to supplant and surpass Aeon's End? And the answer kind of is now no. Is that because it's too like sci-fi spacey and not enough like epic fantasy? Is it people not really liking the mechanics, even though they say so there's some actual, significant quality of life gameplay mechanic improvements? Yours truly can't speak to those firsthand. It's been on my kind of want to trade for list for a while, but I've never really gone after it, right? Whole separate video coming out shortly after this. What's actually on my want to trade for list? Not want to buy list. Want to trade for list. It's much better to trade than to buy, folks. In case you don't know that, you know that. Nobody likes getting rid of games, though. I love getting rid of games. Anyway, can't do it, though. getting totally side tangent here. But that was the question. And I don't think their second campaign did super gangbusters either. Even though, again, I think the general consensus by lay people was sort of more along the lines of Sentinels of the Multiverse, maybe, with the newer edition definitely being a step up. But too much of a good thing? I mean, that's why at the time, I'm sitting here thinking about Aeon's End. I'm not probably going to be backing it unless they really wrote me in when the campaign launches. And that's a shame, but I am always willing to kind of see as well. So that's kind of this yo-yo tug of war situation we're in at this point of going, okay, do I really need more? There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And this is sort of the, we didn't strike as far away as maybe we should have. And what's the difference between something like this Shades of variant versus Zombicide? I have no idea. Cynic in me is going to say that the difference is miniatures. Cynic in me is going to say that not as much broad market mass appeal. I have no idea, though. Just making it up as I go. Like always, right? What else is new? Chris. So that's where things stand. And I would imagine, because it also hasn't bombed by any means, right? We're going to see more of it. And, give me something different. I guess that's what would really get me into it at this point. Is if you do something more revolutionary, right? And that's crowdfunding as a whole. High risk, high reward. You really go outside the box. You go your KDM, you go your Gloomhaven, and you strike it out of the park. Man, holy cow, are you gonna... But, at the same time, if you miss, these aren't big companies, folks. Everyone's like, it's a pre-order. All these companies are pre-order. Majority of them, folks, if they have one big miss, that's enough to not rock the boat, not like upset the apple cart and tip it over, but that's enough to rock the boat Titanic style to make you go, oh geez, right? And nobody wants another Mythic. So how far do you branch out from your known and proven commodities? So I don't envy them, right? This is all just from a consumer side of things too. Safety in what you know, right? So that is January. Let's talk about February though. February. This was actually a fantastic freaking month. And we're going to have to talk about this, kind of quicker because this actually was harder hitting than January as a whole. Kingdoms Forlorn from Into the Unknown, right? The sequel on, the shoulders of Aeon Trespass Odyssey, right? with more of an epic knight fantasy Game of Thrones-esque vibe. If you remember me in my Egg Knight phase when I was sitting on little cushion nuggets with this thing behind me, you know, boy, was that uncomfortable. Let me tell you, that was uncomfortable sitting on that thing. It really hurt my back. So I'm glad I can fit this tiny, like 2.5 foot by 2.5 foot table in this, you know. And as a side note, right, like I totally, you know, wish I had a bigger space. I'm totally jealous of like the other channels have like super high production and they have tables like bigger than the size of the room that I have available in here. So in case you're one of those people who's never seen my videos, like literally I'm almost touching the walls on both sides of this room right now. So don't be fooled, right? It's probably a good foot on this side and maybe a good 2 feet on this side. Anyway, that's besides the point. You know, Kingdoms Forlorn, Egg Knight. Egg Knight's still sitting back up over here. You want to see him? You know, truth be told, right here. You know, Chris gets rid of stuff. Chris doesn't really hype it. Egg Knight, boom. So, is it going to be? When are we going to get it? Is it going to replace Aeon Trespass Odyssey? It's more of a narrative version. How do you feel about it? Did you go all in? Do you have too many of these all-ins like I just talked about, right? Lords of Ragnarok, like I just talked about, right? Mythic Battles Ragnarok. ISS Vanguard just finally arrived. I'm seeing stuff like that get thrown over the place. Chronicles of Junagor all-ins getting thrown up on Facebook Marketplace, trying to get rid of this stuff because the people go, I can't afford this. I don't want this. I just want to recoup something. And you know what? The vast majority of them are, you know, sometimes having some trouble. Not always getting the price they paid. You know, you're going to take a slight loss. And do you want to have stuff tied up that long to take a loss? And again, it has nothing to do with Kingdoms Forlorn. It's going to be much more narrative heavy with a puzzle-like grid system of the main mechanic than Aeon Trespass Odyssey is. And so from a boss battle standpoint, which do you prefer? It's dynamic leveling up of the enemies. Again, it's similar, but also completely different. And I think a lot of people are going to, you know, rightly so, compare head to head. Because I also think the best comparison is going to be those two, not, you know, to Oathsworn or not to KDM, like Aeon Trust Society to KDM, yeah, sure. But this to KDM, no, not as much. This to Kingdoms Forlorn, this to Aeon Trust Odyssey, yes. Not Frosthaven, not Gloomhaven, not Townsfolk Tussle, none of those. So I think the jury is probably still out because we just don't have enough information and we may not get it for a while, but we'll see. Next up, well, it was the #1 consensus YouTube content creator overall meta ranked game of 2023, Earth from Inside Up Games. I think it was fine. Didn't make my top 20. Again, nothing wrong with it. Haven't gotten rid of it yet. Love to try it again, but it was resources, math, you know, combination grid system as a whole. And I just don't know how I feel about that yet. Maple Valley had like 13 resources and it was too much for me. Oh, those were individual resources, not just like, you know, 13 cards on my tableau making all individual resources and trying to min-max like placement of one versus the other and trying to just minutia out 3 or 4 here and 6 or 8 there and 72 here. And you know what I'm saying though? And I understand why people love it. I also understand why people really don't like it. And I'm kind of in the middle right now. I'm just kind of like, okay, I don't dislike it enough to get rid of it, but I also don't love it enough to, well, rank it obviously in my top 20 of 2023. Could that change? Again, yeah, like that's the reason I haven't gotten rid of a couple of these games. Because I'm going, I think I could potentially like it more. But if it doesn't win me over in the next gameplay or two, right? Like, I'm also not going to just keep it on pedigree. Other people's pedigrees, not mine. As evidenced by my top 10 of this past year from 2023, my pedigree and my interest is completely and utterly different than anyone else's. Like I had 4 games in my top 10 that nobody else even had ranked, right? It's like Race to the Raft, Gosu X, Nekojima, and something else, I forget. You know, and then I had Lacuna, which not many other people had too. Like, so my taste is dramatically different. I'm completely okay with that, right? Just like the fact that I am completely okay that I'm a second tier YouTube content whatever, right? In the first place, right? I'm never going to have the production that some of these others will. I'm never going to have the style or the editing. I'm never going to base off my feelings of, you know, self-worth if I don't like the games that other people do. I just don't get any value from that. It's internal, not external anymore. And that, frankly speaking, is more maturity as I've grown up, right? Rather than anything else. I just don't give a flying fruitcake now about, you know, outside influence, right? peer pressure has never been, you know, socially, and even on this, one of those things that's really been affecting me, right? I had a couple friends take me out for my 21st birthday, and I said, I'm not drinking. And they took me to this line dancing bar with like, you know, like 6, 8, 10 other people. And I'm like, hey, look, I'm not drinking on my 21st birthday. Like, I have no interest in drinking. And one of the guys that, you know, was adjacent to us, didn't even come with us, but I knew him from school, right? He's like, I'm going to buy you 2 shots. Here's 2 Jaeger bombs. And he would not take no for an answer. And one of my friends, one of my closest friends to this day, kid I have known since we were in 7th grade, comes over and goes, I'll take him for you. Like, he took it like a hit for me, if you will. And, you know, where I'm going with this story is essentially that it didn't affect me then, doesn't affect me now. And so I'm glad to see that other people like things, but how much other people like stuff isn't going to affect how much I like this. And so even if this is the #1 consensus game of the past decade, you know what? My feelings are still going to be mine. Mind management, secret missions. I mean, it's mind management. Now, the one thing I'll say is the deluxe version, I have not seen as well standing the test of time. I think people have just been relatively happy with the retail version, you know? Again, I think people love it for some of the hidden deduction, one versus all style of things that it is. It's a fantastic game. Off the Page does a fantastic job with this aspect of things and their whole indie comic book thematic incorporation thing that they've got going on. And I don't know what else to say about it. I don't have Secret Missions expansion, so I can't speak to it as a whole. But again, I don't think it's anything that people are going, that's a bad thing, made it too much. Is it necessary, though? I have no idea. But it's, you know, a little bit more of one of the best games that people liked from that year as a whole in 2022. So there you go. Now, then, sleeper hit, Trekking Through History. Trekking Through History, sitting right up there from Underdog Games. I'm gonna make a statement here that I think that is probably one of the more underrated games of the past 2 or 3 years. Just completely under the radar. It's by far and away, I think, their best game. But I also think that the expansion, the little mini expansion, the time travel like little mini expansion, is, you know, probably necessary to give it that oomph and the legs. And I, again, never like saying that with expansions, but this one's like a mini one, right? So a little tweak in it. One of those that you go, I could easily see this being incorporated in the base game and you'd never know the difference. But it's not, because it's a little bit lighter than a little more friendly, but give a little more depth and legs, you know, it incorporates it and it's very nicely well thought of. Then we have Rolling Heights. Rolling Heights from AEG. I looked at this when it came under crowdfunding and I said, boy, howdy, does that look gimmicky. Just like Shake That City, right? I think Shake That City was after it. But I remember that one coming and I said, oh, geez, this is gonna... You know what? I'm eating crow on this one. It's in my collection. I like it. Some people hate it, right? Rolling these meeples, and depending on what sides you get on the meeples, gives you certain numbers of their resources, and then shaking them down in the buildings and building the wee little cubes on the little tile stacks and building, you know, across the whole board, you know, wherever you want, wherever you can get adjacently in the right symbology area. I know why people don't like it, right? That is... I can just see people just, you know, I can imagine their faces getting redder as they're shaking this box, rolling these meeples and just getting more frustrated, right? Ignite. I'm sorry, I can't resist. But at the same time, I kind of like it. It's just me, right? It reminds me of this. It does. Just in a, you know, a chaotic way that shouldn't be as good as it is, but yet at the same time is for me. And I'm very happy to have it in my collection because I paid less than the crowdfunding backers too. Because AEG did their little yearly whatever sale, where May sale, I think it was this past year, and offered, you know, just discounts on like every day of the month. And I waited for like the 55 or so, 60%, whatever discount it was around there. And I got all of it, including the Kickstarter little mini expansions, for shipped less than what the original pledge was for that same stuff on crowdfunding. So, right? Why get it on crowdfunding? Prime example right there. You know, and let's be frank though. Ostia from Uchiba-Koya, as we were just talking about in January stuff. That's the dilemma. It's the dilemma, folks. Even that stuff was not like exclusive, but like bundled price exclusive. And so you really thought anyway. It's, you know, luck of the draw. Luck of the Irish. Four-leaf clover. I don't know where I'm going with this. But that was sort of something that just surprised me. I picked it up on a whim. And you know me again, right? Like, I bought that at retail. I routinely say on this channel, I do not buy things at retail. One, because I don't think it's a good practice, because then you end up filling up that shopping cart to the shipping threshold way too many times, getting way too much stuff. And then invariably, if you are anything like me, you don't have the best track record of those retail impulse buy purchases. You just don't. My first ever retail buy was from Card House. And about a year and a half after that, I had none of those games. None of those games in my collection. And I didn't have any interest in most of them because I didn't know at that point what I liked, what I didn't like. And I just did it because I thought they looked cool. And that's what I feel like a lot of people still do, even with more knowledge, right? Oh, Evacuation. Boy, does that look like a cool Euro. I don't have anything exactly like that. Boy, howdy, is that another miniature dungeon crawler? Ooh, I bet those are going to be kind of cool. You know what I'm saying. And so that's my trouble with this as a whole. But speaking of miniature dungeon crawlers, Deep Rock Galactic also was 2 years ago, which just did their second crowdfunding this past year. And I guess people kind of like it. There's really a cult following from the video game people porting over. And so it raised gadzooks amount of money. But is it something as good as it, again, was potentially going to be more like this of? And I guess people like it for what it is. Is it bias for that sort of thing in the first place? Probably, but does that really make it any difference? Is that really any different than a lot of these other crowdfunding games, unless they're total bombs? 8.3 on Board Game Geek, and for all of the thousands of people that backed it, only 791 ratings, which that's probably a huge dichotomy comparatively, right? Because I have to imagine this is more like a Zombicide at retail too. So that split of not over on Board Game Geek and total in the first place, that's a lot higher of a ratio than I would have expected. And to be clear, that was with almost 20,000 people backing the first crowdfunding campaign, right? Almost $3 million and less than 800 ratings on Board Game Geek. That's weird. That's crazy low to me. Isn't that, am I missing something right here? I mean, there's plenty of people that back these crowdfunding campaigns that have absolutely no interest, idea, or care about Board Game Geek as a whole. But that just seems much lower than if you would have estimated or asked me to guess at the beginning of this video. So is it as good as people say? What do you guys think? I mean, the expansions on the second crowdfunding campaign were expensive. And that's where you make your money. It is. Ask any board game publisher. You make your money off the expansions, not the base game, for the most part, right? The bigger profit margin, at least from that aspect of things. So I don't know. Are we going to see more of it? Well, if it raises that much money twice now, probably. Two more here at the very end. We have Orange Nebula's Unsettled. Now, this is the reprint with new content. This was the cooperative survival, more Euro-based mechanistic approach. Hopping between planets. If ISS Vanguard is your Amerithrash version, this was the Euro version, if you will. Again, poor comparison, just loosely, vaguely throwing out terms here to attract your interest and to catch your eyeballs like insects with a light. But you know where I'm going with this, right, Ignite? And with this second campaign, they had nearly 15,000 backers and over $2 million for a game that has an 8 rating on Board Game Geek at this point, is in the top 1,000, almost the top 100 thematic. And it's a scenario-based cooperative 2 to 4 player game. At the same time, I think it's, really well thought of. I just don't know a lot of people that think of it really well. Does that make sense, right? Like, every time it comes up from a content side of things, I see people really loving it. At the same time, IRL, just kidding, I'm talking like my kids. In real life, I just don't know anybody that's like, wow, this is, or I don't see this game mentioned a ton. And again, maybe it's just more recency bias than anything else. Planet by planet variability in terms of difficulty. It's a cooperative game. So some of the other criticisms are alpha gaming, whether or not you think that's a game issue or an actual group issue. I'll leave that for you to debate in the comment section. I know which side of that argument I fall on, but it's a time management game along with that. And some of these just, again, work better than others. And I don't know which one this is. And I feel like, again, time management in a game like this, it's going to be very group dependent. Does your group enjoy that pressure of time? Or do they enjoy the pressure that the game creates as you can see it closing in, rather than an arbitrary counter or hourglass? So that might be the biggest thing overall. I don't know about replayability with this, right? This came with like 4 or 5 different boxes of planet expansions that you could get. A couple $100 worth from that aspect of things. But is it akin, close to, not the same or similar to the previously mentioned Final Girl and Marvel United in that same sense, where, you know, some of those are just going to kind of be of interest. Some of them maybe going to fall more flat with you. I don't know. But that's just, you know, anytime I see that many expansions on crowdfunding now, that's where my head goes. Truth be told. Almost routinely. No matter how good the game is, right? Like, Marvel United is probably a top 10 game for me all time, folks. And I have no qualms about saying that some of those expansions are just not all created equal. And every time I say something like that, I have a publisher or, very, very fervent fans in the comment section let me know that clearly I'm just an idiot. Not the publishers, they say it nicer than that. They say, well, we'll agree to disagree. And the fans are like, you're an idiot, right? So, but that's, if I can't critique or notice my own favorite shortcomings, I mean, nothing is perfect. It might be fantastic. I might be having a great time with it, but all of these are arguably flawed in the eyes of someone else, no matter how much you enjoy a game. So this one probably has some of those too. I don't know. ISS Vanguard was sort of my pick of the two, obviously, over Unsettled when I knew about both of them. Just like Primal the Awakening was rather opposed to Monster Hunter when they both went head to head. Again, that's not to say the other can't be great. But as I said earlier in the video, hopefully we start to get to know our own preferences so we don't buy the one that doesn't quite fit what we'd like. But are we going to see more from it? Now, Orange Nebula did a little spin, a little twist with their latest one, not going back to it. But again, would anybody be surprised at this point if, just like I said earlier about content staying close, that's made money, that's proven commodity in that sense, come back to this now again for a third time? I'd be frankly more surprised if they didn't come back to this in the next year or two as well. Last up here, 51st State Ultimate Edition, Game Found Edition, new expansion, all the promos you can wonder and amass from Portal as an engine building card driven game. Again, another one of those that I've never been able to pull the trigger on. I've come close to trading for it a few times, haven't really put a lot of effort into it recently. I know a lot of people love it, and this is another game where I really haven't tried to get a lot of it, Ignite. I'm talking to you as much as I'm talking to the camera, as much as I'm talking to myself. That I probably would really like it once I got it played. But, whenever you look at a game like that, you always have a little bit of trepidation, right? Always this little inner thought in the back of my head, right? Like my running narrative going, oh, Chris, maybe you're not going to like it. Chris, that's a little risky. If you get that, you have way too much stuff that's already falling under that category already. You don't need another one of those. And that voice over the years has just grown louder. Say what you will. As right and as wrong at times as it's been, it's there. And for me, for some reason, it's been a block for this game as a whole. And again, I thought this was a relatively good deal when it went to crowdfunding. And I think with some of the exclusives, because there's like a semi-exclusive pledge and an exclusive pledge, when people are selling it and trading for it, like you had to differentiate like kind of what they've got, whether it's really fully exclusive or only partially exclusive. I don't know. I just ran into it like once or twice. I'm totally just probably wrong as a whole, like usual. But that's more of my question, is if I buy it and like it, I don't want to have to like sell it and then get the more complete, exclusive version, essentially, if you know what I'm saying. So that would be my only conundrum there. But, right? I'm not having a copy yet anyway at this point. And I guess for that reason, I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up trading for it. But, you know, if you're like me, every once in a while you go through this heavy trading thing of, I want this game. I'm going to send out 10 messages on Board Game Geek to get this game or to try and trade for this game. And it goes through a cycle and you pick a game and, you know, that's what you do for that month. I don't know. That's where my head goes and that's how I do it. But, you know, Board Game Geeks and, you know, trades and messages back and forth. You get about 1 out of 5 messages gets a response. And, you know, of those 1 out of the 5, probably 1 out of 20 of those are even close to actually getting a trade done. And I am not one of those cold callers, if you will, where they just send the trade request before asking whether or not it's of interest to you. Because if you're like me, my want in trade list is not actually the games I'm super interested in. It's my wish list. And so if you're sending me a trade request with a game that's on my want and trade list and you're taking something super nice from my collection that you want in the first place, doesn't mix well. And so everybody does those a little different. Anyway, side note, rambling there at the end. That's it. That's January and February 2 years ago. Again, how do you feel about some of these? Worth it? Not? Regrets? None? Let me know. As always, I mean, this is the stuff we got to talk about. Because like I said at the beginning of the video, when I just looked back at 2020's list, and I'll talk about that one in another video separately as well, because I think it's worth doing, same thing here. Which is why, you know, being more selective is okay, which is why I put out monthly videos of saying maybe you shouldn't get this. Maybe you shouldn't. Because no regrets. Stay classy. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you want. You made it this far. Hit the thumb button. Does that actually, like, hitting the thumb button, does that, like, you know, put it out there for more algorithms and people? Should I be saying that more? I don't have a clue. I don't pay attention to that. I don't know. Whatever. Have a great day. See you around.